nigga? Hell yeah.
Hello guys, in today's video I wanted to recap the 2020 NBA draft, give my thoughts and insight into the highlights of the day. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe and leave a like. With the first overall pick, Minnesota Timberwolves picked Anthony Edwards from the University of Georgia. Overall, the most complete player to make a difference from the get-go. LaMelo might need the ball from the jump to make anything on the floor, but the Timberwolves, they can plug in Anthony as a Malik Beasley replacement and not lose much. Get the wanted heights further when he flourishes and possibly becomes a 20-plus scorer who can be a real threat on offense, on or off the ball. He has a lot of moves in his bag for being a one-and-done player, and most of them are already very polished. Anthony can pass the ball and is more athletic than an average NBA player, has a quick first step and uses his body in a contact very well. A charismatic and fun guy on and off the floor, but can he commit to being great? Some might say he is an offspring of James Harden or Dwayne Wade, but there are glimpses of someone like Dion Waiters as well. At this moment, there are two big no-nos in his game. He's shooting from the distance, 29% from behind the arc on 8 attempts a game. The second one is his effort, mostly on the defensive end. He has the tools, 6'5", 6'6", with a 6'9" wingspan, can lock down almost anyone in one-on-one situations. But when he's playing team defense, away from the focus of the opponent's offense, he gets lazy, distracted and lost on the floor. I get it, sometimes it's him being tired or turning the switch off. But these situations are far too many, and it's not like Georgia was the #1 team in the nation and he could coast around the court. They were just 16-16 on the season and just 5-13 in the SEC conference, second to last in it. People might say that he was basically alone on the floor, that is true. His teammates weren't the best in the world, but still, you know that you're a highly coveted prospect, show some effort, man. Pick taken by the Golden State Warriors was James Wiseman, tall with a massive 7'6" wingspan, a player who seems to never get tired, always ready to terrorize anyone who touches his paint, and looks like a kid who just won't allow his career in the NBA to fail. So here we come to his projections. In short, James has a pretty high floor in his possible NBA achievements. If he stays healthy, I can see at least a 10-year career in the NBA being a solid starter, but when you look at him from the star player prism, you start to think. Wiseman has a very strong body who won't disappear in the NBA trenches by any means, but his shot looks very mechanically developed, with not a lot of natural fluidity, meaning that he has to work even harder to become some sort of a distant shooter in the league. In his 3 college career games at Memphis, he shot just once from the 3-point line. Right now in his career at most, I see him as a Chris Bosh level shooter in his first years in Miami. By that, I mean a big man who can maybe shoot 1 3-pointer a game with close to 30% conversion. If James wants to get more out of himself, he has to put in that work with the Golden State Warriors shooting coaches. It's easy to see a lot of good in his defense. A great deal will translate to the NBA instantly. He can contest any shot and he will be a wall on defense for opposing teams to look out for. But for one, he has to be smarter about his defensive decisions, not committing to block every shot he gets his way, and get some much needed film sessions in him to learn NBA defenses and players. If he even partly does these things, he can be an NBA all-defensive team player more than once. He developed a lot by stepping from high school into college. Now it's time for the next leap. Third, for the MJ's team, Charlotte Hornets was the youngest of the Ball family, LaMelo. Gifted basketball player, a true virtuoso with a rock. One of those guys who you just give the ball and he will surprise you instantly. He does that. At 18 years of age, while playing at the highest level in Australia last year, he was producing flashy plays every game. His team was awful, being last in the league by a mile. A lot of that was because LaMelo was playing all the minutes he could handle. He was very ineffective and experimental while being on the court, to put it lightly. Ball's game always seems very nonchalant. That might be a problem, seeing how his brother Lonzo has performed on the NBA courts. But playing this way, LaMelo puts the opponents to sleep. No one is waiting for some crazy maneuvers, but there, he does them with the utmost cold-blooded confidence. He doesn't let his thoughts stop him by overthinking. He just plays basketball like he has done it since childhood, or like in the most insignificant practices. He lets the inside Mozart come to life with no resistance. Okay, that's enough of poetry. Now back to the real deal. Similar to Anthony Edwards, he roams around on the defense. Yes, Melo could do it at Chino Hills, cherry-picking every possible shot, but now he had to turn it on or his team would be a disaster. He chose the latter. Of course, I realize that I can't blame just him alone. But if you play over 30 minutes a game as a starting point guard and defense is in the back of the priority list, then your big men have to be a 2009 Dwight Howard to keep the team afloat. With Edwards, we could see that he can stop players one-on-one and can help in team defense if he does clock in, but LaMelo won't always do that. First, he's a bit frail, at around 190 pounds to fill a 6'7" frame. He gets pushed around quite a bit, as much on defense as on offense while he's driving down the line. Defensively, mostly he is a lost cause. Too slow and rarely reaches into his full ability, even though I don't know what his full ability is. Very possibly this 2020 LaMelo's defense is pretty much what we get in the end. Since his early high school, there has always been some talk around his shot and how it looks. At first, it was a much quieter chirp, but as the years went by and shot mechanics didn't change, even got worse. Runes were becoming very public and very real. Let's keep it straight. His shot doesn't have any foundation and it looks like he just flicks it to the basket. Just like for Lonzo, it might be that no one ever worked with them to resolve these problems, until it was time for the NBA. At this level, Lonzo's family realized that his shot won't work here, and for the last 3 years they have been working to change it for the best. It is getting there, but there are still more changes to be done. For LaMelo, I can see some of the same in videos and by his game film, but for now any changes have been very minor. His feet are rarely set, even more. In his shot motion he is almost like turning to the side and very often lands with the hip pointed to the basket. He's a right-handed shooter, but too often his left hand gets in the way of releasing the ball properly. Another very important thing that he has never really worked on is contact finishing. We have seen some progress in this department while playing in Australia, but I look at it not as much as progress, but just getting bigger and more comfortable with those big bodies. Yes, that's progress too, but again, he plays freely and it's hard to determine how much focused work he has done in the last years. From time to time, there have been several public proofs that he is not always ready to put in the work while training. Sometimes for him it is like a 9-to-5 job. Just give the ball to me and I will show you what I can do. Much like Kevin Durant in his early days, that's LaMelo. Last season, Patrick Williams spent at Florida State, where he started none of the 29 games he played in. In spring he was projected as a late first rounder, but as time went by and a lot of unknown circumstances gave him a chance to rise the mock drafts. At the end of the summer he was already projected as a lottery pick, and NBA draft night coming only closer, there were talks of him being a top 10 pick, with Detroit at 7 and Chicago at 4 being the top contenders for picking him. There were also discussions about Chicago trading down, cause they knew that most likely no one would pick Williams before the 5th or 6th pick, but a deal was never worked out. In the end, what gave Chicago the courage to select Williams with the highest pick they have had since 2008 when they picked future MVP Derrick Rose? Patrick is the second youngest player picked in this year's draft, being only a couple of months into the 19th year of his life. This pick was considered a bit or a lot as a swing, but this certainly is an upside decision for the Chicago Bulls.
The biggest surprise of the night from your chair was what?
Patrick Williams going 4 for sure.
He is an intriguing prospect at 6'8", 7-foot wingspan and 230 pounds. Averaged only 9 points, 4 rebounds, 1 steal, 1 block through 23 minutes of game time on a great but defensively minded team. Their best scorer was another lottery pick, Devin Vassell, but even he scored less than 13 points a game, so these numbers shouldn't be a big repellent for NBA observers. Still, he won an award as the best sixth man of the SEC conference, where his team wasn't matched, with a 16-4 record. So just by these plain statistics we can see that he's a team player who can contribute to a winning team, and Chicago needs that. Knowing that Bulls hasn't had a decent player at the small forward position since Jimmy Butler, this was also a very logical pick for them. Patrick Williams is considered a player who has a ceiling to become at least OG Anunoby and at most Jaylen Brown. Sounds amazing. As one of the Patrick's pros is considered his massive frame, strength, and in a lot of ways his body is NBA ready at 19 years of age. Physically and in his abilities to run the floor, he is ready for the big league. He works on defense and is very smart at that end, where big thanks have to be given to Florida State head coach Leonard Hamilton. His teams almost always are defense-oriented, and his players are prepared for games in college and games that gonna come after students' life. At his size, speed, quickness and IQ, I believe he can defend all 5 positions at today's NBA. Chicago won't have to worry about where to put him on that end of the court, most certainly. The offense shows a lot of promise, but like for a lot of draftees, his shooting percentages don't always reflect it. He has solid shooting mechanics, but his motion is a little slow, and just a bit higher jump on his shot would be perfect for what he might need in the NBA. When he's shooting after a dribble, his shot mechanics and conversion isn't as consistent, and that is one of the reasons why he isn't much of a creator with the ball in his hands. He's also stronger driving to the basket than shooting a 20-foot jumper, but he tries to flourish at both. He even has admitted in interviews that often he is too passive on the floor. Even his teammates frequently say to him that he has to take advantage of one-on-one opportunities. That is one of the biggest things for him right now. Just working on feeling the most confident and comfortable on the court as he has ever been. He compares himself to Kawhi Leonard, and I see it. Kawhi had similar tools coming into NBA, but under Pop's wing, he grew into a player he is today. Let's hope there is at least a similar future for Patrick under the new Bulls management. Can Darius Garland and Colin Sexton play defense? No, not really. Here comes Isaac Okoro.
We desire a room.
You better not be wasting my time. You got
Defense?
Come on in, gentlemen.
Last year, Cleveland Cavaliers defense was ranked at the bottom of the NBA. By many, called the best defender in the class. 6'6" small forward / shooting guard who doesn't demand the ball all that much, which is great in combination with Garland and Sexton, who both have the best value when they can dribble more than a couple of times every possession. The true definition of a lockdown defender. He can instantly get into the best defender rankings in the NBA. I see a lot of similarities on the defensive end with Miles Bridges, Jimmy Butler, Andre Iguodala and Jaylen Brown, to name a few. Okoro is a smart player on defense, who stays step ahead in front of everybody. He studies the film and knows the opposing player's favorite moves, and you don't see this attribute in all young guys these days. He can run all game, stays quick on his feet, and can jump out of the gym. What more can you ask out of a great defender? He is a much needed breath of defense for the Cavaliers. In sense of overall lookout at this moment, he can easily become like a bit bigger Marcus Smart on both ends of the court. Inconsistent with his shot, athletic, defends like no one, but his ceiling is much higher. Smart is more of a quick, sometimes unnecessarily shifty player who, in my opinion, is kinda capped out on offense. But Okoro can become a plus offensive player. He has long 6'10" wingspan, and several times we can see that he uses his long plush steps in traffic. Younger Iguodala and Jimmy Butler are the players I see him becoming. Just like them, there are concerns about his shot. He admits himself, he has to keep a high arc on the ball and keep the form correct. At this moment he is more of a spot-up shooter, But if Isaac puts in the work, he truly becomes someone like Jimmy Butler. His dribble is solid, he sees the court pretty well. I like this pick a lot for Cleveland. His coach in college has said that Isaac is a great kid, with a great head on his shoulders. Sacramento didn't believe that Tyrese Haliburton would drop down to number 12 for them, but he did, and Sacramento was as happy as they could be. A lot of NBA media has picked this selection as the best bang for the buck in this year's NBA draft. Before it, he was projected somewhere from the 4th to the 8th pick. The opportunity opened up for Sacktown later in the draft. But why? Basketball media had two, but very big concerns about his game before the draft. His isolation game on offense and his shot. He just lacks quickness and burst in his offensive play. He relies a lot on pick and rolls and going back and forth with his dribble. In NBA competitions, this might be a risky business. Yes, there is Luka Doncic who also meets these criteria, but his back and forth offense is more convincing in all meanings of this word. But the thing that Tyrese can do for sure, he can pass the ball. He said that it comes from a young age when he was better on the court than others. Tyrese felt the freedom to improvise with the passing. It is visible with a number of flashy dimes. For me, he reminds me of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander at best or Michael Carter-Williams at worst, and I'm not sure how much of a Gilgeous-Alexander he is at this point. Tyrese can get a full court pass right on the step, can mostly run the offense of the team, is a big body, but what can he create for himself? At times too hesitant, too slow, and too complicated. His shot, like for most of the draftees, isn't perfect, but I believe he can straighten it out. Coming into college, he was still shooting from the hip, and he has it developed to this stage where it is right now. His shot might not be with a classic form, but he was converting 43% of them in his 2-year college career. He isn't always comfortable when shooting off the dribble or in traffic, but he just has to keep improving his jumper through rigorous work. Because he has changed his shot form in the last 2 years, Tyrese has to get familiar with it, grow more and more comfortable so he finds his natural flow with these mechanics. And the last thing about his offensive package flaws, not only he isn't the quickest, but he also regularly shies away from the contact, in the paint or even while using the screens from the bigs. He must work on it without a doubt. For me personally, he looks like an average defender, has length at 6'5", but weighs in around 175 pounds. Coming in the league, he most likely will be a liability and will be exposed in one-on-one or pick-and-roll defenses, but with time, becoming stronger and adapting to NBA, he can become someone who can guard both guard positions and some forwards. Haliburton has the tools and effort, but sometimes he gets lost in the plays. As ESPN insider Bobby Marks said, best draft preparation interview I have had in 25 years working this job. So clearly, he has a great mind who can play multiple years in the NBA, maybe only as a combo guard who comes off the bench. Greg Anthony's son Cole, all high school time was considered as one of or the one in the class. McDonald's All-American Game MVP, Jordan Brand Classic MVP, Nike Hoop Summit MVP. All the big competitions at that time with all the best players at his age, and he was better than anybody. ESPN ran him as the second best high schooler behind James Wiseman. But what was the reason that he was drafted outside the lottery a year later? Scoring first point guard who wasn't that great at that one thing he does well. 38% shooting from the field, 3.5 turnovers a game. If Cole is given the ball, then he can score a bunch and score at will. He is a dog on the court, doesn't give an inch to anybody on offense and defense. He reminds me of Eric Bledsoe, a big guard who can go down the hill. No other guard can stop him except himself. He likes to play physical defense and backs down to nobody. NBA teams most definitely like that. Cole isn't afraid to bump into bodies in any instance. But he got injured last December, came back in February, got hit in the head pretty bad and never stopped. No complaints, just check up and ball. He has character and grit in him. He admits that he has had a privileged life, with his dad being a former NBA player and NBA analyst at this moment, but that hasn't stopped from him being where he is. Past season, North Carolina's team was the first under Roy Williams, which had a losing record, 14-19. They were one of the weakest in the conference, but all the blame can't be on Cole's shoulders. This year, team wasn't all that good. Cole isn't the biggest, so there is not a lot of versatility in his game. He will be able to guard most NBA point guards, but not all of the two guards, so I don't know what that is gonna be about. I vision him as a serviceable starting point guard like Bledsoe, or coming off the bench and be more of a scoring spark plug for 20-25 minutes a game, but it's not out of realm of possibilities that he becomes the next Jamal Murray. That would look great in those new Orlando jerseys. Finally, Magic would have some much needed identity. From the late first round, two guys struck my eye: Precious Achiuwa at 20 and RJ Hampton at 24. Achiuwa, another great pick for Pat Riley and the Miami Heat, but about him I will talk a bit later. Another, RJ Hampton. In 2019 ESPN high school rankings he was number 5, in front of LaMelo Ball, Isaac Okoro and others. Possesses a combination of athleticism, tall lanky body with quick feet and court vision. But an underwhelming season in the NBL with the New Zealand Breakers didn't help his draft stock. RJ just wasn't given the freedom that LaMelo had. His team was much more competitive than Melo's, and he was under a lot of scrutiny, even though RJ was significantly more effective than Hawks' young player, shooting 41% from the field. Experts highlight his shooting as the biggest flaw in his game. A lot of times teams went under the screens and let him shoot. The same concern is about the NBA. Can he use these moments and sink those shots in? He has to stay confident and just stabilize that shot. He's still young, his shot looks very much okay, and he feels comfortable with it shooting after a motion or after a catch and shoot. RJ has long arms, he feels very comfortable with the ball and can get down the hill against NBA level defense. He has a lot of defensive upside too, doesn't give up on plays. Since he was a kid, his father has taught the work ethic, so I believe there won't be any problems with that. Overall, I just see that he isn't ready for the NBA for now, but when he is, he can become a real NBA rotation player at least, with the possibility of being a top 3 player in a contender like the Nuggets who drafted him. Having all the tools, the Nuggets have to let him develop in the rotation for 2 or 3 years for him to gradually establish himself in the league. Hope with all my heart that he won't be sucked in the jungles of the NBA like Terrence Ferguson is right now, but will show flashes of greatness similar to pre-injury John Wall or Zach LaVine. His athletic and playmaking ability has to be utilized in this league, or I will be deeply disappointed. I picked some players that I look at as possible steals of this year's draft. Cassius Stanley, super athlete, 6'6" guard with a 44-inch vertical, yes that's right, 44. Some might say that it's even higher. Can jump out of the gym like in some of the clips he had in Duke's jersey. Even former NBA star Gilbert Arenas said to him that his league is the NBA, he's not meant for college. After high school, he was ranked higher than his draft spot number 54. He's still super raw, he needs some fine-tuning in his ball handling and playmaking. Defensively, he won't stick out and he can help at the glass as well. As a freshman, he's considered pretty old, 21 years of age. If he can stay in the league for some time, he at least might amass some NBA dunk contest participations and have a story like Derrick Jones Jr., carving out his place in the league by getting the most out of his athleticism. Best case scenario, young Denver's J.R. Smith. J. Scrub. Not the most recruited player out of high school, but there was another problem: his grades. Because of this, he wasn't eligible to play in D1 college. Instead, he joined at the junior college, John A. Logan College. At first, he intended to transfer to D1 after 2 years at JUCO, and that plan stayed. He was planning to transfer to Louisville after the second year, but in the spring there was a change of heart and he signed with the agent, with that declaring to the draft. It's hard to evaluate the talent that he was playing against in junior college, but still, he was putting up 21 points while shooting over 50% from the field. 6'6" lefty guard who seems to be very ready skill-wise, his skill set is very similar to Kevin Porter Jr.'s. Can break defender with ease, gets in the paint and can finish creatively. He's not too bad of a shooter, but doesn't excel in this department. Just like a lot of other second round picks, there is a lot of unknown with J. Scrub. Brooklyn Nets are looking to win the NBA championship as fast as possible, so Jay's chances on this team might be pretty slim. And last one, Cassius Winston. One of the best college players in the last couple of years, 6'1" guard who spent 4 years at the Michigan State University, was a 4-star recruit out of high school. One big comparison that has been with him for a long time is Kyle Lowry. Similar build, very similar moves on the court, a bit chunky, not too quick or athletic, but gives it all on the court. Led Michigan State team to win their conference the last 3 years he was with the team. Big Ten Player of the Year in 2019, he will be a pro since day one. Not gonna lie, picking the winner for this year's draft wasn't the easiest task. As everyone around the NBA has said for like 100 times, this year's draft doesn't feel too strong. There aren't any visible superstars from today's perspective, and the back end of the first round and first part of the second round are clogged with solid role players, but with not a lot of potential gold mines. At first glance, I might have picked Sacramento because of the landing of Tyrese Haliburton at 12 and a great athlete Jamius Ramsey at 43, or Denver getting RJ Hampton at 24, but I wanted to pick something different, not that stale. I picked both Miami Heat and Precious Achiuwa as the winners of the 2020 NBA draft. Precious was the only pick for Miami in this year's draft at number 20. Before the draft, the prognosis was that he might be a late lottery pick, or just right out of it. In the end, he fell a bit further to a team based in southern Florida. Precious' teammate at the start of last year at Memphis College was James Wiseman, but only after 3 games he was suspended for illegal recruiting. After that happening, Precious took over Wiseman's role and was the big man for the team. Further in the season, his minutes climbed in the 30s. He was putting up over 16 points, 11 rebounds, 2 blocks, 1.2 steals. Yep, there are a couple of concerns. He shot the ball from the free throw line at 60% rate, but I believe that he can be a shooter in the NBA even outside the 3-point line. In 31 games he attempted around 1.3 3-pointers a game and has solid mechanics, even the percentage wasn't catastrophic. I can sense that he's a confident player all around the floor. Releases the ball high, has a solid arc on his shot, and it wouldn't be a problem for him to shoot the same 1 or 2 3-pointers a game in his rookie year. He reminds me a lot of Bam Adebayo. Yes, his upcoming teammate on the Heat. Both are active on the defense and at the glass fighting for the rebounds. Can run the floor very well with or without the ball. Have a great motor and are working on the defensive end just as much as on the offense. Great overall package. Achiuwa has a foundation to have a respectable shot on the NBA level without a doubt. I believe that his and Bam's career projection could be very similar. The only thing left to see, how they play together in the future, and can they be on the floor together while team's results aren't sacrificed. I picked Detroit Pistons for a couple of reasons. First, I have to recall that their fairly new GM Troy Weaver, who was hired this summer, did a respectable job in the days leading to the draft, and on the draft day managed to make trades that got more picks in this year's draft. He gave away Luke Kennard and Bruce Brown to get the 16th pick in this year's draft, 19th and 38th, and a couple of players that are solid overall, but I would think that they are not a big part of their future. I must admit that Dzanan Musa still has some promise, and I could see that he develops as a very solid bench player, maybe even a 6-man to boost the team's offense from the bench. But lack of playing time and progress going hand in hand over his last 2 seasons, Dzanan at 21 has to climb a higher mountain than it might seem. But who knows? It looks like there will be opportunities for him on this year's Pistons roster. Let's see who he is after 2 years rubbing cheeks on the bench. About their picks in the draft: Killian Hayes, Isaiah Stewart, Saddiq Bey, and Saben Lee. Killian Hayes with the 7th pick, crafty and very skilled for his age, just 19 years old. Is a great pick and roll player, sees the court very well, can pass with both hands, not the most athletic, but it doesn't seem to be the biggest problem. Just above average in the NBA in my opinion. Basically drives only to the left. The biggest problems for him might be his shooting, and do Detroit Pistons give the keys to their offense to Killian? I think that must happen pretty early in his career. Detroit is clearly starting a rebuilding process. The team doesn't have any real competition for Hayes at the point guard position, so there shouldn't be any obstacles besides how much ball control demands Blake Griffin if he can stay healthy. His shooting has raised some questions. In his 3 years being a pro at the highest level in Europe, he has shot the ball from the distance at a 27% rate. Again, the percentage isn't the only thing I look at. His shooting form isn't all that refined. His ball release point is quite low, brings the ball from the right side in his shooting motion while shooting with the left hand a little too much. And overall, his shot doesn't seem the most fluent and effective on the NBA level. He might become someone similar to D'Angelo Russell or Luka Doncic-esque player, which I see as being more likely, but Killian as well might become some Alec Burks type offensive creator who is very shaky at everything else. Isaiah Stewart. At 6'8", he's a bit undersized for a big, but has a 7'4" wingspan and 250-pound frame. Brings some much needed toughness to Detroit, can shoot just a bit, but there is a lot of reps and practice needed. Rebounds well and can play under the basket against anybody even on NBA level. Detroit reached for him in this year's draft. To compare with a couple of last year's drafts, he looks like a second round pick to me. Reminds me of Bruno Fernando from Atlanta Hawks, who was a second round pick. Stewart might be a bit more physical and demand more attention from opposing teams. Saddiq Bey, 6'8" shooter. Shot 43% from the deep on 5.6 attempts a game. High basketball IQ, just like Stewart. Has a high motor. Wasn't highly recruited out of high school, so that is always kind of a proof that the player is hardworking and the coach will love him. I would say he is a Troy Brown Jr. 2.0, maybe a bit bigger, smarter and defensively active. Might be a helpful starter down the line, even scoring 14 to 15 a game, but I wouldn't be that surprised if he's warming the bench for a big part of his career. And last, Saben Lee, 6'2" PG, fast, gets to the rim, active all around, but can't shoot. We'll see if he even gets a chance. I could see some promise in him if Saben can sort out that shot of his. To be honest, I picked Detroit Pistons because I feel that they did all this trading to get a bunch of role players which they already had, not getting any future assets and losing a proven player like Bruce Brown. Working hard, not smart. Big thanks to everybody who watched this video. Who do you think won or lost 2020 NBA Draft?